Okay, hello everybody. So today we have the pleasure to stay here with the Professor Cornelis from the University of Victoria. So thank you so much for accept the invitation to stay with us. How is going?
Good. I'm good. I'm a little worried about that. I'm maybe not the best expert for the long-term athletic development model. I've done a lot of judo in my career and have trained a lot of judoka, but I'm not sure it makes me an expert. I consider myself more to be of a scientist than an expert on coaching. And my area is mainly economics, but I also do some engineering. So
Okay. We
yeah.
think
So
we think in you because I read your paper about the this topic about the how the long term development athlete can happen in judo. How is the this program in Canada? So I think it's interesting topic just to discuss about.
yeah,
So this is the reason because I think you are the
right.
right person to talk about because you.
That paper appeared in the International Sport Coaching Journal, and it's based on a longer paper that I wrote that tried to compare the LTAD, the long-term athletic development model, with the way that Judo Canada was running its own coaching program. So you basically have the long-term athletic development sits on top, and underneath it, each of the sports bodies in Canada has to follow that or fall in line with that type of a model. And how that's done varies from one sport to the next.
Yeah, so we know that Canada is who developed this program uh, many years ago, and they start to to apply in the different national teams in the different sports, and also another countries just copy the same model or at least try to adapt the model to their own reality. So I would like to ask you the first, what is your opinion about this model? Not just in judo, just I mean in the general sport. Do you think it's
Right.
useful? Which is the problems?
Well, there's some interesting elements in I'll just call it the LTAD, but I do have some objections. There are all kinds of models of talent development out there. All right. And the adoption of any one of those models is going to depend on the ability of the model's proponent to convince sports bodies to adopt that particular model. Now, Bellier, or however you say his name, has been very successful because, in many ways, the long term athletic development model makes a lot of sense. All right. It's a model that takes children right up. The idea is that it trains them and brings them up into a world class situation. Now, my particular problem with the long term athletic development model, well, I have a number of problems with it, particularly as a scientist. So I've approached this from a scientific point of view. And the biggest problem is that there's absolutely no empirical evidence to support the LTAD over any other talent model. It's extremely difficult if you try to think of how you conduct an experiment to determine whether or not the long-term athletic development model is any better than any other model for developing talent. Uh, that'd be a very difficult thing to do. I can imagine how it's done, but I'd need a lot of money to be able to do it because you'd have to do detailed interviews across a range of sports, and that would take an enormous amount of time and effort. Now, what happens is with the LTAD is that it's based on the notion that nurture is more important than nature, that with minor exceptions related to body size, such as weight and height, nature dominates. That's the idea behind the long-term athletic development model, and that's based on research done by a psychologist out of, I think, the University of Florida in by the name of Erickson. Um, and he comes with this idea that it takes 10,000 hours to develop talent. Well, if you think of 10,000 hours, if you need 10,000 hours to get to the podium, then you're really looking at about 10 years. So in other words, if a judoka hits his peak in terms of his ability to produce medals at age 23, you'd have to start people at age 13. Some swimmers develop at age 17 or 18, they hit the top. So then you want to catch them already at age 7 or 8. Now, the big problem is that research indicates that about 9 to 32% of the of any performance. So if you're looking at differences in performance, say between twins, between various athletes, about 9 to 32% of that is explained by training. So that leaves that about 2/3 is explained by genetics, by attitude, by all these other factors that that we often take for granted, or we actually build on them. Some coaches build on those other factors as opposed to simple training. All right, that nature does it. So what Erickson argues is that consistently, he says in one paper, consistently and overwhelmingly, the evidence sheds, or the evidence shows that experts are made, not born. Well, he bases that basically on looking at papers. He doesn't actually put any numbers to it. All right, so that's his basically his ground notion, his thesis. And he takes that thesis and he expands on it. And that's how the proponents of the long-term athletic development model have basically taken that idea and run with it. One of the aspects of the LTAD is deliberate practice. Now, it's not clear anywhere what deliberate practice really means and how you are able to conduct this deliberate practice, except that, quoting Erickson, it has to be considerable, so heavy duty, it's got to be hard, it's got to be specific and sustained, and it's got to focus on what a person, what an athlete, or in the case of music world, what the person can't do well, or perhaps not even do at all. So in other words, if you see a weakness in a judoka, you want to deliberately train that weakness to get rid of it. And that's not always possible. The other thing is these windows of opportunity or windows of trainability that are dominant in the LTAD. So what happens is there's a crucial period under what's called training to train. And if you look at these things, the long-term athletic development model has what's called an active start, which is ages 0 right up to 6, then fundamentals for ages 6 to 8 or 9, depending on whether you're male or female, then the learn to train phase, then the train to train phase, which is for 12-year-olds and to 15, 16. And if we look at that train to phase, training to train phase, that's identified as occurring when peak height velocity occurs. In other words, when you're looking at children and they hit their fastest growth rate, that's when you want to train them. Now, the interesting thing is that if you miss that training, that particular window of training, then what happens is the model, the LTAD model, says that you can't miss it. All right, they say if you miss it, you basically lose your opportunity, or that's a suggestion, your opportunity to ever win a gold or any kind of medal at the Olympics. Well, you know, in other words, the LTAD says there are no shortcuts. Mm-hmm. But we know that a lot of people can start judo or other sports much later in life than that little peak height velocity window and still do extremely well. In fact, winning gold medals. For example, one of my former countrymen, Wim Ruska, was 20 years old when he started judo, and he won the gold medals in open weight and in heavyweight in 1972, 12 years later. Now, there's no evidence at all that that there are these windows of trainability, these windows of opportunity. There's no study at all that suggests that they really exist. And there's no study that tells you, including the LTAD model, it doesn't tell you when these windows of opportunity close. So in the end, there's no scientific evidence of any of this. And in fact, there's a study by McNamara in 2014. It's a meta-analysis which takes all the studies that are available at the time, and they find that there's no support at all for these windows of opportunity. The other thing that the LTAD, and then I'll stop there, ignores is, or rather it confuses trainability with genetics. So they talk about increases in speed at the time of peak height velocity, that they're that's when you've got to train the speed, and they say unless you miss that window, or if you miss that window you can't succeed. But really what they're measuring is an increase in lower limb length. All right, and that's something you can't train. That's not a trainable item, how
Mhm.
fast your lower limbs are growing. And likewise, if you're thinking of power and weightlifting, uh, there's no window of opportunity there, because what happens is people grow and muscle mass is genetically determined. All right. I could weight lift until the cows come home, but I'm not going to get any bigger than I am. I've tried, believe you me, and I can't, I simply cannot gain weight. I could lift heavy weights, but my body just didn't get any bigger. So that's one of the other problems. Discussions about gains to strength at the time of peak height velocity just confuse the genetics and the training. And then lastly, I would say that it ignores incentives. So what are the incentives of athletes to perform well outside of training? I don't know. As an economist or with economics training, I argue that incentives are probably the most important aspect, and one of those is financial incentives.
Mhm.
We have a famous case of four brothers that played ice hockey at a professional level, and they were very good. But there were five brothers actually. The best of them had to stay home to take care of the family farm. So you had four of them becoming professionals, but of the brothers, the one who was the best actually was the one who did not go on to play professional hockey. So I'm I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that the LTAD model is correct in terms of trainability. You cannot train certain aspects of judo or any other sport. So
Okay.
that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting to know your opinion about the this model. So I would like to ask specifically in judo, how is the experience with Canada? The Canada, because the national team is applying this model.
Yeah,
In
I wrote a longer piece that underlies the one that appears in the journal, and in that piece I look at Canada in particular, and I find it very confusing as to what the Canadian uh, program is, how it takes the LTAD model and brings it down to the judo level. For example, at one point, they in one of the manuals that they use for coaching in Canada, they point out that you should not be allowing judoka under the age of 13 to compete in big tournaments. And in another model design or another pamphlet for the under 9, it argues that it's important to have kids enter tournaments. And in fact, in one set of guidelines, and I'm just going to see if I can find it here. I probably can't. Um, in I'll just try and do this from memory. So at one point it says if you're under the age of 9, you should be attending 1 or 2 tournaments a year. And then when you're in the age of 12 to 13, you should be training at least 4 times a week and going to at least 4 or 5 tournaments per year. And that doesn't sit well, because in another manual it says you shouldn't compete before age 13
yeah.
because it puts too much pressure on kids. And I've seen that here in Canada, where we've taken a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old and put them onto a mat area the same way that you'd see at a huge tournament, and you'd have a judge in each corner and a referee, and you've got 2 9-year-olds fighting. And I'm going, why are we doing this? Why don't we just make a small mat area, have one referee, and just let them have fun at it, and you know, uh, let it go at that, which is a model that I saw in the Netherlands, where they ran 300 kids within 3 hours of,
Mm.
they had 10 small mat areas set up, and the children were basically uh, fighting each other, and the tournament was very quick compared to where you had these large mat areas with 3 officials on each mat. And yeah, that doesn't help kids. The other problem I see with Canadian judo is because the LTAD model does not really talk about what happens when you have fighters once they're beyond the age of 18. Because the focus is mainly on children, taking them from whatever age that you should be starting at to the point where they're at the cusp of going on to international kind of tournaments. And it seems like the emphasis switches at that point to being from coaching to suddenly you're kind of left on your own. And we lose a lot of players that way. We lose a lot of people interested in judo because they hit that point and then they aren't quite good enough yet to go to international competitions. And I think we sometimes lose the so-called late bloomers, the judoka who might not win a championship until they're in their late 20s, for example. And I think we lose those fighters quite often because we fail to fund them, we fail to coach them, we fail to do all the necessary stuff to keep them in the sport.
And I would like to ask you because I know that in Canada, I think in the coaching education, they teach how is the model, how to apply the model, but the clubs, the real job in the clubs, the coaches are applying the this model or just is in the paper and after nobody take care about. So
Yeah, I don't think I think when you look at judo, I think the coaches are applying the training models that they find in other countries.
mm,
All right, they don't look at the LTAD model. To me, they pay lip service to the LTAD model, but in practice they implement what we in judo have done for years and years. And part of that, of course, as you know, is lots of randori and lots of competition.
mhm.
I think if you're going to be a world-class judoka, you basically have to get onto the circle of the Grand Slams and the international training and that kind of thing. You cannot do it anymore from staying in Canada.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting because I read in your article, you're talking about yeah, it's true that in some countries, they do a lot of randori during all the weeks, and maybe other countries like Canada, maybe because they don't have enough strong athletes, sometimes they focus more on more tactical work or more work in kumikata. And I remember last month I heard I watched an interview to Travis Stevens from America, and he explained how is the system in America. And he explained that for him, Randori is not so important that in other places like Japan or Europe, because maybe he can't find many strong partners. So yeah, that's interesting because different styles, but they can find a way to success in judo. So it's
Right.
interesting, I think.
To gain success, in my view, if you look at some of these other sports like soccer in Brazil, they play a sport called football, Futbol, which is a kind of, yeah, more like a street
Yeah.
soccer. And and that's where a lot of their Brazilian soccer players come from, that
Mhm.
background. In Canada, we have that some of the best Canadian ice hockey skaters basically learned it by playing on frozen ponds and things like that, where they were on the ice,
Mhm.
12 hours a day as kids, just playing.
Yeah.
You see it also in basketball in the United States, where you have these little courts set up outside, and some of these inner city players, they play all day long.
Mhm.
All right, and that's where you get your skills, because you have to, and I talk about that in the paper, between system 1 and system 2 kind of training.
Mm.
System 1 is where you react immediately without thinking, and system 2 is where you think. And the idea is that you need to lose, basically. So what happens is in randori, in Canada and probably the United States, from my experience there, you don't have enough partners. So you have one dominant judoka who is the one that you want to send eventually to international competition. There's nobody who will beat him. So he does not experience losing. And losing is a very important part because it makes you go to your system 2, which is, why did I lose? and then you have to change things, you see. Whereas system one is just reaction. And system one is extremely important, but you also need to encounter system two, which in my view is the losing component
Hmm.
in order to really succeed. You know, there are, of course, the exceptions where one person never loses because they're just so dominant. They're so much
Yeah.
better than anyone else, right? But for the most part, losing helps you on that road to winning.
Hmm. And also, I would like to ask you, how is the experience in other sports? Because maybe in Canada they are having good results in other sports, and maybe this model is one of the uh, is one
But
of the exit the success. What do you think about?
see, when I look at Canada's success, and I'm not familiar with too many other sports. Well, I kind of watch what happens in baseball, and in because I have grandchildren playing baseball, I can't get them into judo for some reason. I have grandchildren that are playing ice hockey and baseball, and in there, I don't see the long-term athletic development model there per se. It's probably underlying some of the thinking, but I don't see it visually. You can't tell. In
Mm-hmm.
Canada, what happened is that between 1964 and 2012 in judo, we won a total of 2 silver and 3 bronze medals. Not very good performance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, in 2008, Canada was going to host the Olympics in Vancouver, the Winter Olympics in 2010. Well, in 2008, the government realized that we needed to have a good performance, as did a group of philanthropists who were interested in supporting Canadian sports. A lot more money came into Canadian sport. I mean, we're talking huge amounts of money. And as a result of that, as a direct result of that, in the 2012 Winter Games, we came first. That was a first for Canada. And
Mm-hmm.
as a result of this, we also see that Canada's judo programs have really improved. So what happens now in Canada within judo, we basically train somebody to the point where they basically then go and leave their home club and train in Montreal, where the headquarters or the center of training is. And then from there, they they're traveling the world,
Yeah.
sometimes to detriment of a career, right? Because you can't go to school and be traveling to a Grand Slam every few weeks.
Mm. Okay, and I would like to ask you about the level in judo in Canada, because now I think you have six athletes in the top 10 in the world
Right.
ranking, so that's great. And just a few days ago, the Jessica got the won the gold medal in 57, so this is a great performance for her.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would like to ask you, what do you think about how Canada can improve the level, not just in the top athletes, I mean in the future, to have a better athletes in the young athletes, try to be much stronger in the future in the senior level. What do you think is the best
Well,
model?
I think there's a couple of factors here that have contributed to athletic success in judo. One is immigration. All
Mm,
right, we've seen a number of judoka come from Eastern European countries, from Asian countries that have dominated judo. All right, they were trained in those countries, came to Canada, and then uh, basically got Canadian citizenship, and then went on to do well internationally.
mhm,
And then you've got the homegrown athletes who are also, I think, being affected by the immigration that's occurred in Canada. A lot of new ideas from Europe, particularly from Eastern Europe, but also from other places that has come into Canadian judo circles. For example, the club I'm currently associated with is now run by a young man who comes from Japan.
mm,
He's still struggling learning English. Um, so I think immigration had a lot to do with it, and I think the amount of money that we've put into the sport has a lot to do with it. And I'm surprised, but we're seeing that more and more people are coming into judo. And part of it, I think, is the popularity of UFC and mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And they're looking, so they go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they're not finding quite what they want. Maybe it's a little more expensive than what they want.
mm,
And we that they then come into judo. So we've seen an increase in that base, and you know yourself, as you increase the base, your chances of having better athletes down the road is much greater.
Mm,
I think those are the factors: the immigration, the finances that are going into judo, and the level of instruction, not just coaching, but just instruction levels are going up.
mhm. So just no, just to finish, I would like to talk just about the. I hope in judo or also in other sports that we can develop a good plan, a good long term plan because they help the countries to develop their athletes. Because for example, in my case in Spain in judo, for example, we don't have a very clear model. Each club works different, so all depends in which province you are. Maybe yeah, it depends on which club or which federation is totally different.
Right,
So I think the good thing for this kind of models is that at least you have a plan. You have a plan to follow them. Maybe they have some mistakes, but at least you can you can do different stages. I think it's positive. It's true that if we can find a better plan, is of course we can it will be better. Yeah. What do you think
yeah,
about?
no, I agree totally with you on that. I think that we do need some kind of a framework in which we develop our athletes, and the long-term athletic development model suggests that kind of a framework. I'm not really keen on it because I think they emphasize too much for tournaments and too much performance at the very young level of 9, 10, 11,
Yeah.
12 year old. That's the only real problem that I have with the model.
Mhm. Because for example now I'm working in China and you know the Chinese method for training is totally different. It's like yeah, all the professional athletes they are living in a sport in a high performance training center, just like training hard since they are young athletes. So
Mhm.
my plan is to try to help the judo association try to help to develop their own plan in China. Of
Right.
course it's not
Yeah. Yeah.
the real situation here is not the same in Europe or in Canada, but at
Right.
least is the idea is try to create a plan, taking in count the real situation in this country about the judo. But I hope I can develop this plan here because maybe can help to develop the judo in the future. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So part of your job is to get as many people into judo as possible.
Yeah, here in China, the problem is not the people. Although judo is not is not like basketball, for example, here that is very popular, or I
Right.
don't know, table tennis or badminton. They are more popular than judo, but China
Yeah.
is quite so big. So maybe we have more than 1,000 judo athletes training full time. I talking about senior athletes. So it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have around 25 high performance training center in judo, just in judo. So, but
Wow.
finally, the results they are not really. Yeah, they are good. All the Olympics they usually have some medals, but if you are economics, you work. If you know how much is each medal, it's really crazy because they spend a lot of money invest not just in judo in all the sports, but
Right.
sometimes
Right.
the results, yeah, you can see in the Olympics that the China have a really good results, but if you look at the amount of money they put every year, is not so good results, you know.
Right. Right. So you're trying to get more results per dollar.
This is the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Eh? No, but
That's
I think in judo it's not just about the results. I think it's good to improve the education of the young athletes because some of the athletes maybe they burn out very
yeah.
early
Yeah.
because also in China one of the things is that the athletes retire very soon because many of them they have no motivation. Sometimes several strong injuries, very young. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a big problem. I think it's very important to take care of the athletes, to listen the science, not just the training hard. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So this is the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. I don't envy you. You have a hard, difficult job.
Yeah, yeah, sure. But yeah, at least I try to improve, and I hope they can listen and
Yeah.
take some advice, and I hope we can improve together. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you so much for your help for this interview. I think it always is interesting to talk with different people with different points of view. In this case, this topic I think is very really interesting. Also, in not many research in judo in this topic. So yeah, this is the
Right.
reason because I
Yeah.
find this interview interesting for the audience.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah.
My biggest surprise was that most of the literature was done by psychologists.
Hmm.
All right. None of them had were coaches, and none were really involved in or engaged in any of these sports.
Yeah. So this is the idea of my website of this channel, the judo training. Also, is just to 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 make easier for the coaches to talk about these topics. They can read more information because sometimes the papers in the scientific journals they are really interested, but maybe the coaches don't know how to find, don't know
Right.
to
Right.
how
Yeah.
to interpret the results. So the idea of this
Yeah.
website is just to have more
So,
useful information for the coaches. Yeah.
yeah. Are you able to put that other paper on the background paper to the to the shorter journal article? Are you able to put that on your website?
No, I didn't put yet, but I'm going to put it now after the interview.
Okay.
We can add the both articles, and I think all people interested they can check. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, for sure.
Anyway, I appreciate you thinking of me.
No, no, no. Of course. Thank you so much for your help and keep in touch. I hope Canada have good results in the Olympics. I
Yeah.
think they are doing well, especially the girls. It's a pity that they have two really good girls in 57. Only one can go to
Only
the
one
Olympics.
can win.
Yeah, I think who is going to the Olympics? The gold medal? Yeah, Jessica or Krista? Do you know?
I don't
Maybe.
know.
Yeah,
I don't.
maybe.
I follow the Dutch a little bit more than I do even the Canadians,
Mhm. Yeah, I think.
because right now my home club. I have two home clubs, one in the Netherlands and one in Victoria.
Mm,
And
yeah,
the
that's good.
Victoria one is closed down because of COVID.
Yeah, and now Netherlands is performing quite well. Yeah, also in the world tour, have a really good athletes. I think this
Yeah.
in the next Olympics they can do a good job. Yeah,
Yeah. I hope so too.
yeah.
So two
Okay, so
countries,
yeah,
and now China.
yeah, China and Spain. Spain today also in this championship in the World Championship they are doing a good performance. Today,
Oh, good.
they won the one medal. So this is the four medals. Is the first time they won four medals in one World Championship. So it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that's
Good.
great. Okay, so thank you, Cornelis,
Okay.
for your time. I hope
Yeah.
you're going well and see you soon. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.